Okay, today we're here with Colby Jenkins, who is running for Congress. And Colby, can you just tell us a little bit about why you decided to run in the first place?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me, Abby. I'm a combat veteran, Green Beret, born and raised in Roosevelt, Utah, small town, Utah. And when I look at the state of the world and I see the world burning and I see all the conflict that's happening, let alone the lack of our border, I can't help but want to get in the fight. I can't help but want to take leadership, judgment, and accountability to the swamp in Washington, D.C. Because here in Utah, we know how to take care of our own and we know how to stand up for our values, and that's not what's happening in Washington, D.C. So put me in. I would love to go back and fight for my neighbors and my friends here in Utah.
Wow. Let's start with your background in the military. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences? I have your brochure right here,
Yeah.
and there are some very interesting things highlighted. Like, um, there was a hostage situation where you were able to rescue somebody in the jungles of Colombia.
Yeah, a little bit on that. So after combat in Afghanistan, my Special Forces A team had some other activities, but then we found ourselves on another deployment in Colombia, South America, and our primary mission there, besides training and working with our Colombian counterparts, was to help rescue our Americans. There were 3 Americans that had been held captive for nearly 6 years deep in the jungle of Colombia. And so it was our role to fight, to train and equip and advise our Colombian counterparts, but ultimately rescue our Americans. And it was very sensitive, very complex because it was known that any attempt to rescue our hostages would be met with their execution. Like the captors had made it known, if you try and rescue them, we'll just kill them. So don't even bother. And so we didn't want to try and just go in guns blazing and ultimately get our guys killed. So it was very difficult, very complex, and at the time that we were on the ground, we'd been, doing all that training, equipping, working with our Colombian friends, and being out in the jungle. And we got so close to our hostages that we thought this was going to be it. And unfortunately, we just missed them. We determined later we were able to scoop up some of their captors, but we missed our guys. And my deployment ended. I now was on a new assignment in the Pentagon, and fortunately, after all those years of hard work, American Green Berets getting so close, the Colombians were actually able to rescue our Americans without a shot fired, and it was quite a success for them that we had a hand in as well. And so later, to put a bow on that story, I was at a conference, a military conference, walking the floor, ran into my old commanding general from that was commanding me in Colombia, and he brought me to another gentleman, and he introduced me, and it actually was one of the hostages that was now free, now back in the States, and his name is Keith Stanzel. Now, I knew Keith immediately because I've been staring at his picture for a long time, but Keith had never met me. And General Cleveland, our commanding officer, introduced us, and he proceeded to tell Keith that Colby and his guys, Colby's Green Berets, were the ones that got closest to rescuing Keith and had worked so hard. And Keith was so grateful, and we were both so emotional. And the thing I'll never forget is he said, Colby, we stayed alive every day for 6 years in that terrible situation because we knew guys like you were coming. We knew it. We knew that you would always be on the rescue. That's your instinct. That's what Americans do. And so for me, that's the type of attitude and culture that the Colby Jenkins A team for the second district is going to take to Congress. We will always be on the rescue. We will never forget who we work for and who's hired us because they depend on us. Just like our hostage Americans in Colombia depended on us to rescue them. And so it's an experience I've never forgotten.
Oh, that is incredible.
Yeah.
And I love that you say you're going to take that to Washington. I'll just let you kind of take the reins from here. What else would you like to highlight from your military career, or as far as policies you'd like to see take place? You just
Yeah.
take over from here, and I'll listen.
Okay. Well, and then stop me if I get talking too much. But a, a key thing that's important to recognize is there's a positive contrast in choices here in the second district. For me, nearly 31 years ago, I raised my hand to support and defend the Constitution. I swore an oath to the Constitution, and that oath has been seared into my heart. It's been part of my career, my professional adult life for 30 plus years. It's not something that I just fell into a few months ago that I just now decided that I would fight for the Constitution. It's something that I've gone to combat for and that I have friends who've died for. And so with that Constitution comes critical rights and privileges that we must never take for granted as Americans. And central to that is our ability to vote. You know, here in America, we have some of the best blood that our nation's ever produced has been spilt so that we can vote, that we have the opportunity to go and cast a vote. And so for me as a representative to stand in front of you and ask for your vote, I better have never taken that for granted, especially if you have to be able to trust me to now vote for you, then that sacred trust between our founders, between the defenders of our nation, and that ability to vote cannot be compromised. And so an important contrast to understand in my race is that my opponent, Celeste Malloy, she didn't even vote in the last presidential election. And it's questionable how many other times she may have voted. It's unfortunate that she rationalizes that choice, saying that it was just too complex, too difficult. For me, it's not about rationalizing on the Constitution and people who have fought and died to give us precious rights. And the ability to vote is something that's central to me. And so my constituents, the people that I'm looking to be hired by, can count on me not rationalizing our constitutional principles. Another important thing to contrast to know is I've been in the military, active, Guard, Reserve for almost 30 years now, if you count my time as a cadet. But not all of that has been in the military wearing uniform. I've been a citizen soldier. I've actually worked in the corporate world as well. I've had the opportunity to be exposed to some of our most high-end technical solutions to some of our toughest problems that we have to solve. And so being around innovative thinkers, entrepreneurs, especially here in southern Utah, where I've had the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs who are launching their own ideas that have intellectual property that they're trying to protect, that are trying to raise funds to support their ideas. All of those innovative considerations factor into how I lead and the lessons that I've learned. And so taking my combat experience, my true combat experience, coupled with corporate leadership experience, is a unique set of lenses that I hope to take to Capitol Hill so that I can work robustly on behalf of our friends and neighbors here in the 2nd District. You know, and then critical here for here locally in the 2nd District are issues that deal with our land and our water. And it's important to recognize that Chris Stewart was a warrior and a veteran like myself and fought for our land and our water issues here throughout the district. There is and will not be any daylight between me and where Chris Stewart stood. Definitely, I will fight and support. That's a given. But where the difference comes between me and my current opponent, Celeste Malloy, is on those issues of constitutional principles, the big issues that should be basic. Am I going to protect us against all enemies, foreign and domestic, when it comes to our Constitution? Yes, I will. I have, and I will continue to do so in Congress.
Amazing.
When I have the opportunity to vote on behalf of our constituents here, I will approach problems and votes really looking through 3 lenses. One is limited government. Is this vote that I'm about to take going to grow government or limit it? And it better be the latter. It better be that I'm voting to limit and stop government from growing. For several years, I worked in the Pentagon, and the height of bureaucratic bloat. And the Pentagon, just like many federal agencies, the trend tends to be if something's not working, rather than fix that or defund it, they just put a Band-Aid on. And they'll create a new agency, new funding, new people, and that bloat just grows. So any vote that I take, I will be looking at how am I limiting government? Am I just putting a Band-Aid on something, or am I insisting that we fix what we have, or we stop funding it? You'd think that'd be obvious, but boy, that is not how it works in Washington, D.C. So limiting government is important. Fiscal responsibility, fiscal conservatism. Are we spending money that we don't have? Are we simply borrowing money from China to send it to Ukraine while we pay the debt? Any vote that I cast will have to be managed through those 2 lenses, limited government and fiscal responsibility, fiscal conservatism. If anything that costs money better be taking money from somewhere else. It's called a pay-go. We better take money from something, defund a program if we're going to add funding to something else or new. And then the third leg of the stools that I will be standing on, the three lenses, is national security. As a combat veteran, I will make sure that the Department of Defense, our military, is not a social experiment. That our focus on the military should be to make sure that it's ready and it's lethal. I won't be focusing on how can we run these social experiments like transgenderism, gender mutilation, and funding abortions with taxpayer dollars, enabling the travel of military service members and civilians so that they can get abortions on the backs of taxpayer dollars. That shouldn't be part of what constitutes our military force. But that's what's happening now. And that's why we see the Army particularly at its lowest levels in terms of total numbers since World War II.
Huh.
The Army has missed its recruitment numbers 2 years in a row. And we ask ourselves why. Well, if we look at our youth of the current generation, why would they want to sign up to join something where they want to fight, but it's become just a big social experiment. It's anything but focusing on how do we train to win and lead in the world. And that's unfortunate that our military has gotten almost to that point. And it's not for a lack of our soldiers and our service members by any means, but it's the national level, the policies that are being crammed down our warfighters' throats that they didn't sign up for. And so I hope to be a factor in that calculus, that national security decision making, because nobody knows war better than somebody who's been there, and nobody wants to stay away from it more than somebody who's been there. But we maintain peace through strength, and those are the types of the attitudes and accountability that I hope to bring to that calculus.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that plug from Ronald Reagan, right? The peace through strength one.
Yeah.
Oh, everything you were just saying about the military, I cannot tell you how much that rings true to me. So I'm glad. I'm grateful that there is someone like you that wants to advocate for a better way to approach all the things with the DoD.
No, thank you. If I could talk, maybe the border is a big issue.
Please talk about the border. Yes.
Yeah, as we are now out grinding on the campaign trail and working our way through the 13 counties of the second district, really almost all through Utah, north to south, almost the number one issue that I hear over and over is, what do you think about the border? What are you going to do about the border? What do you think about the border? What are you going to do about the border? And so for me as a combat veteran, I recognize an invasion. And that's literally what we're having at the border. We don't even have a border. And so for me, my number one priority is to close our border, to defend our border, and to stand with President Trump when he's elected. By the way, I voted for President Trump in both previous elections, and I will vote for him again now because of that leadership, because of how my life was 3 years ago. It was much better in many areas under his leadership, and we need that back. So on the border, that's where I would fight first on the border to make sure that we don't need any new laws. We don't need any new magic wands. We just need leadership. We need leadership. We need to bring back what was rolled away with under the Biden administration. Remain in Mexico, have more Border Patrol agents, build the wall, remove those incentives for illegal immigration to happen. No, I'm for legal immigration, but we're not helping anyone if we allow them to come through by the tens of thousands and now live in the shadows and be taken advantage of, live on the streets and live off, day to day. That's not what anyone comes to America for. So I want to make sure we do it right and that we defend our border. And it's in the military, it's called a defense in depth. Why don't we work with our Mexican neighbors and help them defend their southern border? Their southern border between Central America is just a couple 100 miles long. What if we help them defend there and change the calculus among our Mexican neighbors from, hey, let's defend our border instead of just keep going north. Right now they just keep going north, come pass on through. And then we have almost 2,000 miles of border. So it might be much easier to defend in depth down further south, helping our Mexican friends to defend their border than to just let the flood keep coming our way. And so the border is certainly a high priority. And then when we look at Ukraine, America has to make sure that our fight for national security is always an away game. We don't ever want it to be a home game. And that's what's happening right now as Chinese nationals are infiltrating in through our border. We don't even know who's inside America right now. So we have to secure that, but then we have to maintain our presence abroad. We have to, there's a reason why we have bases in Japan and Korea and Germany, Hawaii, Guam, throughout the world, because we need to make sure that American strength is where it can best be throughout the world to maintain that away game. But right now we're compromised at home, and we're defeating our strength abroad by not being strong at home. And so when we look at things like Ukraine, well, if I was asked to vote on funding for Ukraine, I would say, well, let me vote on funding for the border first. Let's secure our nation first. And oh, by the way, what is our goal in the Ukraine? What's happened with almost $100 billion already? Where has that gone? Who's accounting for that? And what are our NATO partners doing? You know, I love how President Trump has stood up and said, hey, NATO partners, do your fair share. you, all of us signed up to say that we would be in NATO and we would contribute 2% of our gross national budget. I forget the technical term, but 2% of our budget, national defense, to securing of NATO. And boy, if you could look over the historical figures, I think there are 6, maybe 7 NATO countries that even come close.
Wow.
Whereas the United States is predominantly, we are the 911 for NATO. And that can be no more. And that's what I appreciate about Trump. Now, he may say it differently than I do, but the principles are the same. You know, he puts people on their heels who are not used to being on their heels. And that drives respect, and it brings accountability. And so for me as a warrior, as a combat veteran, I want a leader who's going to stand up for me and make sure that my teammates and the allies that I have to count on are standing shoulder to shoulder just as equally instead of riding on our backs. And that's what I appreciate.
Wow. That was beautifully said. Thank you.
Oh.
You've got a great message, and I could not agree with more with like just all of what you're saying. It is so important to keep us a strong hold in the world, because people do look at us as the standard. And if America doesn't exist, then
Yeah.
where are we going?
Yeah.
It's very scary.
Yeah. I could tell one more little story that I tell out on the trail.
Please.
That's
Yes.
right. And how much time do we have?
My kids are asleep, so as much time
Okay.
as you want.
Okay.
You're good.
You're like, I'm free at
Yeah,
last.
and honestly, I have to add, I believe that's a tender mercy, because this never happens that they're asleep at the same time. So God wants you
Oh.
to talk to us.
Awesome. Thank you, Abby. And it's no coincidence that we connected Saturday night, too.
Yeah.
I was able to meet your husband, and thank you for your service. I mean, I'm always quick to, people easily thank the service member and say thank you for your service, especially when I'm in uniform. But it's important that I pause, and if my wife's nearby, and say, it's a family business. So Abby, thank you for your service too. The service member cannot serve without the family, and so it's a family business for sure. And that leads me to what I hear on the trail as well. There's so much frustration with the state of affairs in the world and here at home, and people will ask me, why would you even want to do this? Like, what are you thinking? Why would you want to do it? And one woman in Hurricane actually asked me, what gives you hope? Like, why do you even have hope that you can do any good? And as she said that, it hit me dearly, because it reminds me of where I get hope from. And next to my family and my wife and my faith, our youngest daughter, her name is Olivia. When she was 3 weeks old, I deployed to Afghanistan, and I missed nearly the first year of her life. I was a new Green Beret captain leading my A team now in combat, while I had a month-old baby back home. And we named her Olivia Hope, in the hope that I would return, that I would be able to return and be her father and be in her life. That was our hope. And I did return, and now Olivia Hope is a cadet at the United States Military Academy at West Point. And in 2 short years, she will be a young lieutenant, leading the Army, or leading soldiers in the Army, and serving our nation. And so when people ask me, where do I get my hope from? Well, it begins with my own family, in particular, and my daughter, but also her generation. Her generation who have stepped up, who've now raised their hand and been willing to put their lives on the line. So for me, that's the personal motivation for why I want to do this, because her and her generation, their sacrifice deserves leadership worthy of what they're willing to do. National security policy, accountability worthy of what they're going to put their lives on the line for. And if you ask me if I want someone else in the second district chair that can impact in that calculus, no way. I want to be there. I need to be there. My team needs to be there so that we can help with that.
Wow. That made me emotional.
Well,
I
it
am
does me
so
too. Yeah.
Olivia Hope,
Yeah.
that is so beautiful, and
Yeah.
that, like, you really do have a special interest for your daughter and so many others. So that is,
Yeah.
wow, good stuff.
Well, thank you, Abby.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to be sure to cover? Or
Um, let's see. When I could talk about the caucus, that's next Tuesday, though. Okay. Yeah. So people ask me, what's your pathway to success, to victory? And I say, well, it begins here in Utah with the convention process. And that the first start point is our statewide caucus night on March 5th. So if you're listening to this, I'd encourage you to go out and find where your precinct is meeting. You can do that through the utahgop.org website. Type in your address and it'll tell you where to go on Tuesday, March 5th at 7 p.m. Arrive a little bit early so that you can register, and at your precinct meeting, you'll be able to vote on a number of issues and leadership positions. But two key positions will be voted on, and those are the state delegates. And so I'd encourage you to run to be a state delegate, or at least get acquainted with the people who are voted to be your state delegate so that they understand how you're thinking about issues and the candidates that you're wanting to support. And so from the caucus night then goes campaigning through the up until the convention. The state convention is April 27th, and we will be working laser focused on our state delegates, making sure that I get to personally connect with them either through phone call, text, or direct mail or town halls. And we aim to hit that April 27th convention with as much delegate momentum as possible, and that's our first target, April 27th convention. And so I encourage everyone to go out and just get involved. Go to your precinct meeting and listen and learn. And then if you feel comfortable, run for one of those positions. And I'd love to earn your support. I'd love to have you take a look at our team.
thank you.
You bet.
And I like that was explained, because that process is not a very well-known process. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Especially if you're rather new to Utah. I mean, it's unique to at least our state.
It is.
Okay. Take care. Thank you. Nice seeing
All
you.
right. Thank you. Have a good
Okay.
one.
You too. Bye.